Good afternoon, and welcome to the Wednesday afternoon conference call with Trusts Unlimited. This is Jim George speaking. I'm the non-attorney spokesman and facilitator for Trusts Unlimited, and I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to this call, particularly those of you calling in for the first time and those that will be listening to the replay over the next 24 to 48 hours. We like to move quickly through these calls and bottom line the information for you. I'm going to attempt a full call today. The reason I say attempt is because I have several calls out there. I'm expecting a return call. A couple of them are pretty important in terms of the revaluation of the dinar and some of the things that are going on in the Ukraine. I hope that I can get through this call because I don't want to have to make a decision about checking out. Although what I'll probably do is just continue to get through this call and then hopefully try to call these people back, and then we'll start a whole new game of phone tag, but it is what it is. So let's go ahead and get started first and talk a little bit about the situation in Iraq. By way of disclaimer, Trusts Unlimited is not the purveyor of the dinar and these other currencies. We're not advocating either the sale or purchase of these currencies, but as rather substantial currency holders ourselves, we're sharing with you the information we believe to be relevant. In our view, the most relevant piece of information would be the potential window for the reinstitution of the dinar in country, and then subsequent to that, the revaluation globally. And in our opinion, this could happen at any time. There are some issues in Iraq which could be problematic, and I'm going to get into those. But all of the boxes that need to be checked beyond the few things I'm going to discuss have been done. And the CBI at this point will make the determination about when to reinstitute the currency and at what rate. So I'm going to talk about Iraq, and then I'm going to talk about some global issues, but let's start with Iraq. Now, there are a couple of things, as I said, which could postpone the reinstitution, although not necessarily. One would be the parliamentary session scheduled for this Saturday, March 26th. At that session, they are allegedly going to finally seat the new government, name their president of the republic and their prime minister. If they fail to do this for any reason, it could result in the dissolution of the parliament and new elections. I think that sort of Damocles is enough for them to proceed, but you never know with Iraq. But even if they don't proceed and constitutionally seat the government within the prescribed period of time, that does not necessarily mean that they can't postpone and retain parliament. I know it's not technically constitutional. The parliamentary system is complicated. The system that the Iraqis have set up, because they've had tribal and sectarian cultural issues as well, has made it extremely complicated. So it's pretty hard to say absolutely what's going to happen because, frankly, they don't know themselves. But again, the session is scheduled for this Saturday for the seating of the new government. The other issue is a case that the Supreme Court's going to be hearing on April 4th, having to do with the change in the exchange rate. Now, there are those that argue that this lawsuit is dealing only with the near rate, the acronym is NEER, and not the rear rate, which is the REER. Now, what are these rates? The near rate is the nominal rate rather than the rear rate, which is the real exchange rate. Now, the near rate, they're estimating, and I've discussed on my calls, that when they do reinstitute in country, the rate's going to be at a slight premium over the dollar in order to incentivize people to stop using the USD and to use their own currency. So the nominal rate, they're estimating to be $1.50. The real rate, the rear rate, they're estimating to be at least $3.22. In my opinion, the lawsuit is dealing with the rear rate, the global rate of 322 or better. Now, the last payment tranche made to Kuwait was made in U.S. dollars, but they had, in parentheses next to that, the equivalent in dinar. And if you did the math on that, the dinar would have been worth, in its equivalency, $3.81. So the CBI is signaling that, in their view, the rear rate, the real exchange rate, should be certainly north of $3 and actually closer to $4. So let's hope that's the case. But again, at the end of the day, it's the CBI that's going to decide when and at what rate. And I see no reason why they cannot proceed expeditiously, irrespective of the issue with the seating of the new government or whatever ruling the Supreme Court may make. Now, globally, there's some things going on that are going to affect all of us, whether you have currencies or not. I'm going to explain in a moment why it's necessary to set up a trust like ours, even if you don't hold currencies. But if you do hold currencies, these reasons make it even more imperative for you to protect this newfound wealth. Now, yesterday, Joe Biden made a speech. He mumbled through most of it, but he did finally touch on something that a lot of us have been discussing that has kind of been, has kind of been set to the side, and they don't really want to talk about it. But I think Biden's been forced to finally discuss this. And this has to do with something he referred to as the new world order. Now, when he said that, I kind of stopped and went, the new world order? What he's doing, he's distinguishing between what in my estimation was the New World Order as first uttered by George Bush Sr., which was basically the globalist plan, and the New World Order. What is the New World Order? Well, it involves the Green New Deal. It involves a global digital one world currency. It involves a global corporate and individual tax structure. So this is not good news for anybody because the kleptocrats globally are on the march. Lay on top of that what's happening to the U.S. dollar. This is important for us because when we go to the bank to do our exchange, what are we exchanging into? USD. Although, as time goes on, I'm going to start investigating exchanging into some other currencies as well. But for the time being, and for all we know, they may require that all exchanges are done in USD. And I'll explain why in a second. But what we are witnessing is the devaluation of the U.S. dollar. The Biden administration's printed nearly $6 trillion since they've taken office. And what happens when the money supply is increased substantially and the number of goods and services remain static, or perhaps even because of supply chain issues are reduced? We have inflation. What is inflation? It's not the increase in value of tangible assets, of goods and services. It's the reduction in the purchasing power of the currency, and that's what we're involved with right now. We also see globally that we've reached the end of the petrodollar globally to be replaced by the yuan or possibly some of the regional currencies. There are 3 or 4 different regions where the countries like South America, like the Middle East, want to exchange among themselves with their own currency. So we might decentralize, and rather than using one currency in exchange for oil, there might be regional currencies. But either way, it's the end of the petrodollar. And again, lastly, we also see they're all pushing now for a digital currency. And I'm going to get into the digital currency in a minute. But even though that's not talked about that much for reasons that I'm going to discuss in a moment, that's the scariest implication of all as far as I'm concerned. As a matter of fact, the war has begun. Several countries are moving to accepting the cryptocurrencies rather than their own fiat currency. Bridgewater and Associates, which is the largest hedge fund in the world, is taking a very large position in cryptocurrencies. So there is a battle going on between the central bank system and the central bankers, and then private sector initiatives, some of the other countries that are trying to move away from the central bank, and investors like Bridgewater and Associates that are taking positions in cryptos. Now, again, whether you have currencies or not, the issue at hand is how do we avoid the control and confiscation of our wealth from this new world order? Well, the first thing an individual would need to do is to establish the right type of a trust. And second, transition away from currencies and financial assets to tangible assets in order to return as much control as possible to the individual. Now, the new world order bunch is well aware of the fact that there will be flight from currencies and from financial assets to tangible assets. And this is why buried in the Build Back Better program, which mercifully failed, they may give it another try, although I don't think they're going to try before the midterm elections. And, of course, if they lose the midterms, the thing is finally irrevocably dead. But buried in that was a wealth tax. If you had an estate worth $5 million or more, you were going to get hit with a 3% annual wealth tax. So in addition to an income tax, in addition to a capital gain tax, in addition to a sales tax, and in addition to the inflation that they've basically forced us to all deal with, in order to ensure that they're going to be able to tax our tangible assets, they tried to create a wealth tax. Now, why am I pointing all of this out? Well, ordinarily in these discussions, I begin to explain why we decided to establish a special trust for those of you that had dinar, and I will be getting into that and explaining the reasons why. But as things have progressed, and probably that's the wrong word, as things have devolved, it's obvious that everybody needs to establish trust to protect themselves from what these kleptocrats have in mind. Now, this trust that I will be discussing, this particular trust, has a long history in Western civilization and Western jurisprudence. Similar trusts to the one I'm going to discuss with you were actually established by the emperors of Rome in order to protect their wealth from the Senate. For millennia, the royalty in Europe utilized these trusts to ensure that their property remained in their family rather than escheat or reverse back to the monarch. The monarch himself created trusts in order to protect his wealth should the family, for any reason, not accede to the throne for any number of reasons. When the New World was established and land grants were given, the individuals that were recipients of these land grants, prior to even establishing our Constitution, utilized these trusts in the colonies, in North America, in order once again to protect those land grants and their wealth from escheating or reverting back to the monarchy. These trusts are also inculcated in our Constitution. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go to the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution, and I want to read this section because I want you to understand that the best protection we have are the inalienable rights that exist in our Constitution. We know, of course, of the First Amendment and the Second Amendment, but beyond that, we tend not to look too closely at the other amendments, but I'm going to read the Fourth Amendment. It's a short amendment. Quote, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall be issued but upon probable cause, supported by an oath or affidavit, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons and things to be seized. Now, these are the rights that each individual citizen enjoy. However, through the creation of a trust, which is a contract, and which is allowed and specifically discussed as we read further into the Constitution, additional protections and safeguards are in place to ensure that your assets cannot be even reviewed, let alone confiscated, without full due process. The other issue, and I'll mention it again, is the global digital currency. I think what our government would like to do, again, although they no longer have control of what's going on in Iraq, they cannot supersede the operations of the CBI. The United States in the last 12 to 15 months has lost a lot of its global influence. The petrodollar is being replaced. The dollar is being devalued courtesy of the programs that the United States government is putting in place. So the digital currencies are what they would like to establish in this country prior to the revaluation of the dinar and these other currencies. I don't think it's going to happen. However, any dollars that you have in a U.S. bank the day they go digital will dramatically change the equation for you. With a hard currency, you own that currency subject to interest payments. What do I mean by that? It means the U.S. dollar in hard currency is a Federal Reserve note. What's a note? It's a debt. So you own the money. You can take it out of the bank at will. You can put it under your mattress. You can spend it. You can do what you want. But the interest must be paid through our federal taxes. Now, that part's not going to change with the digital currency. But with the digital currency, you no longer own the currency. You're leasing it. It's owned by the central bank, i.e. the Federal Reserve. When you have a digital currency, you've lost control of liquidity. The banks will control the liquidity, and by doing so, they're going to be able to control your behavior. And this is a credit system that exists in China and several other countries. This is purely a control mechanism. Now, we're told that the digital currency is safe, which means that, of course, it's not safe. It's just another lie. The system is unsafe for a number of reasons. We know that all kinds of government agencies have been subject to cyber attacks. We're being told now about solar flares, which can take systems down for any length of time. And, of course, if there is ever to be a World War III, God forbid, the first thing that's going to happen are going to be EMT weapons. What are they? Electromagnetic pulse weapons that wipe out all digital information and shut a country down. So a digital currency is not safe. The safest thing, honestly, in a digital war is hard currency under the mattress. Now, they're not going to allow us to do that. But we still are going to need to transition to hard currencies, tangible assets, and we want our net worth in the trust product that I'm going to discuss here, whether you have currencies or not. So let's talk about the things that we can do to protect our wealth from civil suit and hopefully government intrusion. Now, one of the things we can establish are LLCs and sub-S corporations. They do provide some level of asset protection, but primarily by dividing business assets from personal assets. Now, that's helpful for those of us that are entrepreneurs and have our own businesses, But for those of us that have currencies, that's very little help because these currencies are personal assets. In addition, courts have ruled that LLCs and sub-S corporations that are owned in the majority by either one person or a closely held group can be pierced for civil litigation without probable cause. So they're not going to be useful given the scenario that we're looking at. Then there's something called the revocable living trust, sometimes referred to as a living or loving trust. Now, these trusts are statutory trusts designed to protect your estate and help it to avoid the cost and delay of probate. But revocable or living or loving trust can provide no privacy or asset protection, so they're going to be inappropriate for your needs. In addition, the LLC, sub-S corporation, family limited partnerships, and revocable trusts are all statutory instruments regulated on a state-to-state basis and are subject to annual fees. Then there's something called the revocable trust. Now, some individuals have established something called an individual or single irrevocable trust, and they will overcome the constraints and the limitations of the instruments I just discussed. But even the individual irrevocable trust has a flaw, and it's this. All of your assets and net worths are housed within that one individual asset or legal person, as it's referred to under the law. So if any individual asset within that individual trust is subject to either investigation or civil litigation, that would necessarily drag all of your other assets and net worth into that litigation as well. The only solution to this problem is to create a package of irrevocable trusts, because a package of irrevocable trusts is only the ironclad way to protect your wealth and to maximize your protection from an intrusive government agency. Now, in addition to that, let's add to that, again, individuals not just that have their own estate and they wish to keep their assets private and they wish to protect it from civil litigation and they wish to make it as difficult as possible for government agencies to intrude into their private personal affairs subject to the Fourth Amendment right to privacy. But add to that individuals like ourselves that hold a substantial amount of some of these currencies and anticipate a revaluation in the not-too-distant future. Well, you're going to need to establish this trust package to protect yourself from all of the things that I've discussed here. And in addition, this trust package must be established prior to the revaluation of the dinar and these other currencies. And I'm going to review with you the benefits that you will enjoy by establishing this trust package, not only as a citizen of the United States wishing to protect your wealth, but as a citizen of the United States who has currencies, who anticipates their revaluation, who understands that they're going to, at least initially, need to exchange into the U.S. dollar, and wants to ensure that that money, once converted to other currencies, to other tangible assets, can protect that from governmental confiscation. Now, by establishing this trust package, you will preserve your privacy and your anonymity. That's because assets within our trust package are sealed, meaning that the general public nor the federal government will actually know what's in that trust and what's your actual holdings and net worth involved. Second, by establishing this trust package, you are going to avoid personal IRS scrutiny. If you are holding these currencies in direct title when they revalue, the IRS computers will probably spit out an audit for that taxable year. And given the magnitude of this revaluation relative to your prior year's earnings, you very well may be looking at a full-blown 6-year audit. Now, such an audit would be time-consuming. It would certainly be frustrating because it's come along at the precise time that these currencies have revalued, And the last thing you want to be doing is dealing with an IRS audit when you have much more important things to be dealing with. And third, the cost of a 6-year IRS audit would most likely be more than the cost of our asset protection trust package. On the other hand, if your trust is in force, pre-RV, and you have assigned your currencies on paper to that trust package, you will have successfully transferred the taxable event of this revaluation from yourself personally to the trust. Now, this is important for two reasons. First, there's less than a 10% chance of an IRS audit if this taxable event were to occur within our trust package. And second, and most importantly, even if the IRS determines to do an audit, they can't do a 6-year audit. Why? Because the only taxable event within the trust will be the revaluation itself. The third reason you'd want to establish this package is if you plan on gifting currency to family and friends. Now, philanthropic gifting can always be done on a tax-preferred basis, either pre- or post-RV. But in order to avoid a substantial 40% federal gift tax, you need to give currencies to family and friends prior to the revaluation. Now, if you're gifting to individuals that you have no problem giving them the currency to exchange for themselves or giving them the U.S. dollar lump sum after you've negotiated the exchange, that can be accomplished outside of the trust with a standard gift letter. But if you are hesitant for any reason to give these individuals the post-RV lump sum, then you can gift to them through our specially designed gift subtrust. And I frankly know of no trust in the country that's established a gift trust like this. And because you're gifting to them through this gift subtrust, their U.S. dollars will be protected along with yours. In addition, the language of this gift subtrust allows you to gift up to a certain amount of a currency or currencies, meaning you've created a sliding scale and you can give to these individuals the exact U.S. dollar amount that you had in mind, irrespective of the exchange rate. And because their U.S. dollars are within this gift subtrust, which is part of our package, you will have direct control of those funds, meaning that you can manage, invest, and distribute this money to these individuals as you deem appropriate. The fourth reason you'd want to establish this trust package is because it's been structured in such a way as to allow your estate to bypass the cost and delay of probate and the federal estate tax. And this benefit is the benefit I referred to earlier, why trusts like this have been established for literally 2,000 years in Western jurisprudence. Now, let me give you two quick examples to show how this works. Scenario number one, you purchase 5 million dinar for $5,000. The day after that, those currencies revalue for $25 million. The day after that, you pass away, leaving your heirs an estate of $25 million. Now that estate must go through probate, a process that ordinarily can take anywhere from 6 to 18 months. But probate is a public disclosure process, meaning that the general public will be aware of the size of your estate, who your heirs are, and how much each stands to inherit. So if anyone feels they have a legitimate claim against you, your estate, or your heirs, they can simply file that claim with a probate court. And that could tie the estate up for years and sometimes even decades. And your heirs will have either limited access or no access at all to their respective inheritance until the probate process is completed. Then there's something called the federal estate tax. This is the tax that the federal government would assess in order for that estate to be transferred to heirs. Under current law, approximately $10 million of that $25 million estate would bypass any federal estate tax, but the balance could be taxed as much as 65%. Now, this scenario is not only unacceptable, it's completely and totally avoidable. How? Scenario number two. You purchase 5 million dinar for $5,000. The day after that, you assign those currencies on paper to our Asset Protection Trust package. The day after that, those currencies revalue for $25 million. The day after that, you pass away, leaving your heirs that very same estate of $25 million, but this time protected in our Asset Protection Trust package. As a result, there will be no probate. There will be no public disclosure of your estate. Your heirs will have immediate access to their respective inheritance, and the federal estate tax will be zero, saving each of your heirs as much as 55% of their inheritance. Now, the fifth reason you'd want to establish this pre-RV trust package is for two very specific asset protection benefits. One pre-RV, one post-RV. Pre-RV, this trust package will allow you to circumvent something called the Uniform Fraudulent Transfer Act. Now, what does that mean? Under our system of civil procedure, you can only be sued for what you actually own in direct title or the value of that asset when you've transferred it out of title to an entity like our trust package. So let's take the previous example from before. You purchase 5 million dinar for $5,000. You transfer those currencies to our trust. They subsequently revalue for $25 million. You begin to live a lifestyle more reflective of your newfound wealth, and a couple of years down the road, someone sees that you're living rather comfortably and decides for whatever reason that they're going to sue you. Well, this prospective plaintiff has a couple of problems. First, he or she better have a very strong case and very deep pockets, because this trust has been structured in such a way as to make it extremely expensive and extremely time-consuming to pursue civil litigation. But second, and most importantly, once any prospective plaintiff learns that pursuant to the Uniform Fraudulent Transfer Act, the only thing they could ever win by way of a civil award would be $5,000, the value of the currencies at the time you transferred them out of title and to our trust, and none of the post-RV value of $25 million, there will be no lawsuit. Now, post-RV, there's an asset protection benefit I like to refer to as limited liability stop-loss. This protects you from future bad acts after you have acquired this wealth. This protection is accomplished through a legal strategy referred to as segregation of assets. This is why we've established a package of trusts. And again, this is how it would work. We'll use the same example. You purchase 5 million dinar for $5,000, transfer the currencies to our trust. They subsequently revalue for $25 million. And now that you have $25 million in trust, you decide to make some purchases. So you purchase a larger primary residence, a vacation home, perhaps a half a dozen rental properties for tax write-off and additional cash flow, a couple of new cars, a boat, and let's say an RV. But as you purchase these items, you place each of them in their own separate sub-trust to be managed by your master trust. Now, how does this protect you from future bad acts? I'll give you an example. Let's say one day you're driving one of your new cars. You have an accident. The accident is clearly your fault, and tragically someone is seriously injured or even killed. Well, the family of the victim is going to want to sue you. But remember, civil suits are about monetary awards, and you don't legally own anything. So the plaintiffs would be left to sue the owner of the car that you were driving. Well, who owns that car? One of your sub-trusts, of which you are merely the beneficiary. And what's in that sub-trust? Merely that one car with a car insurance policy. In that scenario, the car insurance carrier will negotiate an out-of-court settlement with the victim's family. You will not be involved in those rather unpleasant negotiations. The car insurance carrier will repair or replace your car, making you whole. And this is the important part. All of your other assets and net worth are safely protected in the other sub-trusts. Why? Because under the law, those separate sub-trusts are separate legal entities or legal persons having nothing whatsoever to do with the accident in question, meaning the plaintiff has no standing to pursue separate legal entities or persons with regard to this accident. So this package of trusts work very much the way a barge would work, a commercial barge where all of the valuable cargo is stored in a series of small compartments. Why? In the event that any compartment is ever breached, the only potential loss would be the cargo in that one compartment. The cargo in the other compartments is safe and secure due to the firewalls, and the barge will never sink. And this holds true with this trust product and all of your net worth that you've safely bestowed to this trust. Now, these benefits, for those of us that have currencies, are lost to you if you do not establish this trust prior to the revaluation of the dinar and some of these other currencies. Now, there is one other benefit, and it's this. If you are the holder of one of our pre-RV asset protection trust packages, which is phase 1 of our Turnkey program, you will be eligible to participate in phase 2 of our program. All of the products, services, and professional referrals that will be made available to you after the revaluation of these currencies. Now, one of the benefits that you will enjoy is that approximately 30 days after the revaluation globally of the Iraqi Dinar, Trusts Unlimited will be sponsoring a post-RV seminar, at least for the time being, to be held in Disney World, Florida, and Orlando. Now, if COVID should rear its ugly head, or if there are other logistics issues, then we will have a DVD put together in our home office. It'll be on our website, and we will, of course, have Q&As like we're having today. But at that seminar, of course, will be the staff of Trusts Unlimited to instruct and assist you with the management and funding of your trust packages. Many of our clients have already expressed desires to establish scholarship funds, foundational trusts, special needs trusts, charitable remainder trusts, and even the more complicated 501c3 nonprofit and offshore trusts. And, of course, the proper way to fund those newly formed post-RV entities is with the direct transfer of funds from your asset protection trust to those newly formed entities. We'll also have our tax specialists on hand. With this newfound wealth, you're going to want to learn a lot more about some of the more sophisticated tax strategies that you can utilize to legally minimize your tax exposure. We will also have our independent fee-based wealth managers there as well. You're going to need to transition away from currencies and financial assets to very select securities and tangible assets in order to avoid the volatility that will definitely occur with the revaluation of these currencies. And there are a number of reasons why you're going to need to do this as soon as possible after the revaluation. First, we know that 95% of all windfalls, however large and from whatever source, are lost within 3 to 5 years due to inexperience, mismanagement, and fraud. We also know that the revaluation of these currencies and our exchange into the U.S. dollar is going to increase the money supply, reduce the purchasing power of the dollar, and so we're going to need to transition to other assets. We also know that the general global shift from fiat-based to Basel III compliant commodity-backed currencies in and of itself is going to create extremely volatile financial markets. So once again, we need to take a flight to safety, move to tangible assets, not only to avoid the volatility, but to avoid the control that will necessarily exist with the creation of a one-world digital currency. Now, our trust package is initially a package of 10 trusts consisting of one master trust that will hold your assigned currencies pre-RV, financial assets like bank accounts and investment accounts post-RV, and will manage your subtrusts. One gift subtrust, which is an optional subtrust, which you can either decline to establish, or even if you have established it, it can later be transitioned to a standard subtrust, and then 8 additional standard subtrusts to hold physical assets like homes, cars, boats, etc. Now, this was the simplification of a rather sophisticated trust package that we established for our more affluent clients prior to the advent of these currencies. But once we got involved with these currencies, we understood that we need to create a trust package. Now, our original trust package had an initial cost of anywhere from $6,000 to $10,000. But we knew that price tag was going to be unaffordable for many. So again, by simplifying and back-end loading this trust package to post-RV issues, we've been able to reduce the cost to $3,000. Now, there are several ways you can pay for that. If you pay us up front, we'll discount the price further to $2,500, saving you an additional $500. If that's not possible, we've even created a deferred payment arrangement. You'd make an initial payment of $525, which sum would basically offset our out-of-pocket costs just to produce and deliver your trust to you. The balance of the $3,000 would then be paid in $100 monthly installments. We will charge no interest. The only proviso is once the revaluation of the Iraqi dinar occurs globally, any unpaid balance would need to be paid within 30 days. So with the deferred payment approach, anyone that has currencies and understands the need for getting their affairs in order and their trust enforced pre-RV should be in a position to afford to do so. One other suggestion, we do accept credit cards. Pay us up front with a credit card. Not only will you get the $500 discount, but the minimum payment on your card would be less than the $100 a month you'd pay under our deferred payment arrangement. But we will work with you in whatever method works best for you. Now, because we are aware that we could actually be coming close to the reinstitution and then revaluation of the dinar, we have put additional paralegals on, and we have been getting our trusts out within 3 working days. So once we have your application and your initial fee, your trust will be in your hands probably within a week, or if not less. So we are moving forward there. Now, we will be moving to a Q&A in just a minute, and I will be giving you our contact information. So I strongly suggest you have a pen and paper ready so that I can give you our contact information. But before I do that, and for the benefit of our newer callers, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Trusts Unlimited and why you should seriously consider contacting us to get our no-obligation initial package. Now, this package contains everything you need should you decide to proceed with the establishment of your pre-RV asset protection trust. But again, you're under no obligation to do so. There's a lot of information there for you to digest, information about us, about trusts, about the revaluation, and then some post-RV issues and benefits as well. But before we go to the Q&A, again, let me tell you a little bit about Trusts Unlimited. Our trust package was authored by our attorney, Robert Bly. He's been a practicing attorney for over 40 years, specializing in the areas of estate planning, asset protection, and offshore planning. I myself hold degrees in political science, macroeconomics, and finance. I've worked in these areas for over 39 years, and I, along with my clients, were personally involved in the reinstatement of the Kuwaiti dinar in the early 90s. So between the two of us, Robert Bly and I have about 80 years' experience working precisely in this niche area, and I frankly know of no firm that can make that claim. For those of you that are holders of currencies and are in my age group, for example, you need to understand, and you probably do understand, that it's precisely those times in life that you need and want control that you can lose control. If you've lived for any length of time, you've experienced in your own life or through friends and family Things like unexpected divorce, permanent incapacitation, the tragic onset of dementia, premature death and prolonged and complicated probate processes. Then there are, of course, business losses, investment losses, and unfortunately, even bankruptcies. Now, the number 2 loss of wealth, courtesy of the information age, is identity theft. But that's in the aggregate. But the number 1 cause of personal loss of wealth remains loss through civil litigation. Anything you own in direct title can be taken from you. So in point of fact, the only way that you can manage, protect, and control everything at all times and in all circumstances is through the establishment of a package of irrevocable trusts. And particularly if you have an asset like these currencies that you're anticipating a substantial increase in value. And we at Trust Unlimited will do everything we can to help you accomplish your personal and financial objectives both pre- and post-RV as we understand them. So again, thanks for listening to the call. I'm going to go ahead and open the Q&A here. And while I'm waiting for any potential questions, I'd like to give you our contact information. You can go to our website, which is trusts with an S, unlimitedllc.com. Our email address is trusts with an S, unlimitedllc@gmail.com. And our phone service is 307-274-4122. You can contact us if you'd like to get our initial package. Again, you're under no obligation to proceed. You can review the package. There's a lot of valuable information for you to digest. Should you have any questions, you can contact us by phone or email. We'll be happy to answer any questions you may have, and there will be no consultation fee. So let's go to our Q&A here. Our first caller is area code 405. That's 405. Go ahead.
Hello, Jim. This is Doug in Oklahoma City.
Hey, Doug. How you doing?
Doing very well. A couple of questions.
Sure.
Central bank digital currency, CBDC. I was reading, I think on Monday or Tuesday, and especially after Biden made his announcement about them considering it, which already means that they have done extensive work on it, that this plan presumably is to be implemented sometime in the first 2 quarters of 2023. If that is accurate, we do have some time, let's say this, if the dinars finally reval, we do have some time to try to convert as much of the currency into tangible assets. From a speculative standpoint, would you think that if this happens and you are holding physical currency outside of a deposit in a bank, that they would have or give you a requirement of time to change that over? Would that be something you think they might force us to do? And then I have a follow-up question.
I think that they'd have a constitutional leg to stand on. Now, for example, let's say hypothetically that the institution revaluation occurred. We went to the bank, we did our exchange. Now we have hypothetically $10 million in our trust bank account. We're anticipating these control mechanisms to go in place in early 2023. Well, we could transition those assets to gold. We could transition those assets to silver. We could transition those assets to, say, some of the offshore clone mutual funds that invest in mining shares, so we could enjoy the same movement and still have a little more liquidity. We can invest in something called REITs, Real Estate Investment Trust. We could purchase direct real estate. We still would be exposed to the asset tax if it's ever passed, and which undoubtedly would be part of this new program. But I frankly don't see this happening, and I will tell you why. Barring some X factor that we know nothing about, I have a very hard time. I don't think the Democrats have any shot at holding the House, and I think they got maybe a 20% chance of holding the Senate. So if just the House flips, they're not going to be able to do any of this. Now, they could try to do it by executive fiat, but that's all going to get tied up in the courts. And again, I don't see how they prevail. But that's just my opinion.
Well, that would be wonderful. Something that we haven't talked about in quite some time, it hasn't been mentioned, all the preparation that Iraq has done. I mean, we have followed it meticulously. There has been ad nauseum speculation on what needs to be done. And yet one of the currencies that's out there sort of swinging in the wind is the dong. And we never hear anything about what Vietnam is doing to prepare themselves in case that currency also revalues. Is there anything that would limit or prevent that from happening other than the fact that we don't see anything or hear any news about what they've done or tried to do to bring themselves out of a programmed rate?
Right. Well, the dong has been kind of asleep. Vietnam has actually been functioning very well with their currency in the program rate. They're utilizing reserve currencies. They are rich in oil. A few years back, they found a very large oil field just off of North Vietnam. They also have an indigenous plant like stevia that is a good organic artificial sweetener. So they have certain things that they can market globally. But because they're in a program rate, they've been able to function with reserve currencies. But when we transition over, they're going to want to revalue because their currency will be Basel III compliant. They'll actually have more bang for their buck with their own currency than they would globally with the reserve currency. So no one knows the dates or the rates, but this is just my opinion, and I hold on as well. I think that the linchpin to this whole darn thing is the dinar, and I think that when the dinar goes, I think some other things are going to pop quickly. And this is my educated guess, the next thing to happen after the dinar, in my opinion, would be the dong. So, I feel like everything hinges on what the dinar is going to do. There was a time when they thought the dong might even go before the dinar, but I don't think one of them's going to go and the other one's not. I think when one goes, the other one's going to go pretty lickety-split.
Very good. Last question. You mentioned the seating of the president and the prime minister, and there have been a number of posts that have basically said that's done and it's not done, that's done, it's not done. Even if on the 26th, if they don't get it done, that's a significant impediment to them moving forward, it would seem to me, just based on how much we've been through in the last 15 to 16 years with this stuff, and your final opinion on that.
Okay, well, if they don't get it done, the only one that gets hurt is them, because the caretaker government will just stay there until they resolve it. But meanwhile, the parliament would be dissolved. Now, the problem is the radical Shia faction within the parliament that just don't want to see any of this done. They want Iraq to remain the piggy bank of Iran, because once again, they're as radical Shia, their loyalty is to the Shia, not to the quote-unquote modern sovereign nation state of Iraq. So that's the problem there. But fortunately, as I said, the caretaker government would remain in place. It would be the parliament that would be dissolved, and the CBI's made it clear that CBI operations are up to them and them alone. So we want to see the government seated. It certainly would move everything forward, but the notion that if they're not seated, that's going to scuttle the reinstitution and revaluation of the dinar. No, I don't think that's the case.
Thank you very much. It's always good to talk to you, Jim.
Nice talking to you, too. Take care, man.
Bye-bye.
Okay, our next caller is now. Hey, Les, what's up?
Hey, what's up, Jim? I'm all right. How are you?
Okay. What's going on, my friend?
Well, the first caller actually knocked out 2 or 3 of my questions, but
Happens to you.
he was pretty thorough. So with the tangible assets being the gold, the silver, did you say money market or mutual funds?
Well, there are mutual funds that invest in tangibles like gold and silver mining shares, industrial metals, lithium mining, although I hate the whole notion of lithium mining. But there are funds that invest in tangibles, so they'll move along with tangibles, and they're not directly in the banking system. So you could liquidate that if you wanted to as well. At least you have control of that asset.
Okay.
As one example would be the Fidelity Select portfolios. The Fidelity funds have about a dozen funds that invest in specific sectors, and one of their funds, the Select, I think it's gold and silver mining, and it's actually a little more volatile than gold and silver. When gold goes up, it goes up a little more, and when gold goes down, it goes down a little more. But it's not. It's liquid. So it's when you have gold and silver, it's you can't put it in your pocket and go to the store. But when you have these funds, you can liquidate all of it or a portion of it that day into cash.
Okay. So if those companies that we would actually move into that would give us that opportunity are in the U.S., they're obviously dealing with U.S. dollars, which means if we go to liquidate, we're going to be getting the value of the U.S. dollar, which means more dollars?
That's true. But, the problem with devaluing a currency is that you have more physical dollars, but it has less purchasing power. Even the federal government takes advantage of that, which is one of the reasons they don't mind borrowing, because when they borrow money and create debt, they take our tax dollars that fiscal year to begin to pay down that debt, but they also monetize the debt, meaning by devaluing the currency and by creating more currency, it's easier for them to pay the debt off down the road because they have more dollars. They're just worth less.
Yeah.
So, in other words, we're paying the interest. They're going to pay the principal back, but they have more dollars to pay. But it's just the whole thing. The truth of the government is the United States government right now, under our central banking system, and the Federal Reserve is a central bank. They euphemistically call it the Federal Reserve, but it's not federal. It's a private corporation, and there is no reserve. They just go down the basement and print their helicopter money. We're paying the interest on a fictitious money they just create. It's a Ponzi scheme.
Which brings me to the $6 trillion that he's already printed for the 2 years that he's been in office. Now, how do you get control over that?
You replace these people. You go with a different system. The system will implode on its own. It's happening. We went from the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913, which was actually the third attempt at a central bank, which did a pretty good job until the end of World War II. Then they had the Bretton Woods Convention, where the United States currency was utilized as the reserve currency in the world, and the United States did create the Marshall Plan to rebuild Europe, and that went along. While then in the 70s, we went off the gold standard and went full fiat, and now that system, about 50 years later, it's run its course, and now the dollar has been devalued at home. The dollar has been devalued globally. The petrodollar is about to be replaced with the yuan. The U.S. dollar, which is the majority of the basket of currencies within the IMF, may very well be replaced by the yuan and a couple other currencies collectively. So we're seeing the demise of the U.S. dollar. And the creation of a one-world digital currency. Basically, our sovereignty and our wealth, against our will, are being, disseminated around the world, and it's our own fault. We've done this to ourselves. But fortunately, we still have a U.S. Constitution, which means that we can create a trust to protect our privacy, to protect our wealth from confiscation civilly, either from private civil suits or from the government, and our ability to transition to tangible assets. And remember, the sale and purchase of tangible assets pursuant to Section 643B, A, and B of the Code allow us to buy and sell tangible assets on a tax-preferred basis within an irrevocable trust. So we do have protections, whether we have currencies or not, and that is to take advantage of our Fourth Amendment right of a private contract, which a self-settled asset protection trust is. You've contracted with yourself to protect your wealth from these kleptocrats.
Okay. And last question.
Yes, sir.
How can we find out which crypto or cryptos did that hedge fund dive into heavily?
I'd Google it. I'd Google their assets and find out what they've done. Now, sometimes that stuff's privileged information, but in the case of the mere fact that they announced that they're taking a large position in cryptos tells you, well, of course, they're called hedge funds. So what are they doing? They could be hedging against the demise of the U.S. dollar and global fiat currencies, or they could just be the white hats fighting the good war against the central banking system that they know is corrupt. They could also be saying, they're going to use their own private wallets to hold these cryptos so that if there is a digital currency, they want to avoid assets being in a digital currency, the central bank digital currency, because a crypto is digital, all right? But it's not central bank digital. It's still private sector. So, and again, I mentioned some of the other assets, but you need to diversify anyway. I'm just saying we've reached a point where the fiat currencies globally have run their course. They're debt instruments. They operate on debt, and they're going to either have to pay the debt or forgive the debt. What I think their plan is to say, look, we're going to take control of everything. We're going to forgive all your debts. Oh, but you don't own anything. We own it all. I mean, the other thing you can Google is the real estate, residential real estate being gobbled up by Vanguard and by BlackRock. I mean, they're trying to basically take away private ownership. So, this is what we're dealing with.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks again for your time. Thanks for doing the call. Say hi to the professor, and I'm glad your daughter's doing better.
Thanks
a lot. I meant to ask about her last week.
Thanks a lot, my friend. Take care now. Bye-bye. Well, Les was my last caller for today. Again, I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to this call. If the things we've discussed today are of interest, and certainly if you're the holder of some of these pre-valued currencies, I would strongly suggest you contact us to get our no-obligation package. It does contain everything you need if you do wish to proceed and establish your own self-settled asset protection trust. But it has a lot of information I think you will find very, very valuable. I gave you our contact information. We will be back next week. Certainly if something of a dramatic nature were to happen between now and then, we'll try to get out an emergency email and schedule an emergency conference call. But failing that, we'll be back next week, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Thanks for listening, everyone, and have a great week. Bye-bye.